Sometimes it seems like the world has far too many jerks and not enough geniuses. However, it turns out that being a jerk and being a genius aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, some of the most famous minds in history have belonged to some of humanity's most colossal creeps. Here's a look at some geniuses who are actually terrible people. Isaac Newton's insane pettiness. Sir Isaac Newton is up there with the greatest scientists of all time. Among his many accomplishments, he managed to invent calculus, figure out the 3 laws of motion, and discover gravity. He was also constantly involved in petty disputes with other scientists about just how much credit he should get. Mathematician Gottfried Leibniz is perhaps his most famous adversary, but that's partially because Newton allegedly went out of his way to completely erase another rival from the history books, Robert Hooke, a brilliant scientist called the English Da Vinci. Hooke and Newton disagreed on many things, including whether or not Hooke should get credit for his contributions to the theory of gravity. Once Hooke died, though, the argument was over, as Newton went on a smear campaign to tarnish Hooke's reputation. Newton allegedly may have been behind the destruction of the only known contemporary painting of Hooke to ensure history would forget Hooke's face, a move known in scientific circles as the theory of total pettiness. Nikola Tesla believed in eugenics. If you're not familiar with eugenics, it's the idea that mankind should be bred for specific mental and physical traits in order to create what some might term a master race. At least that's what the Nazis were aiming for with their program of eugenics. But Hitler wasn't the only one in favor of the idea. Genius inventor Nikola Tesla was all about it too. Yep, that's right. In 1935, right as the Nazis were coming to power, Tesla wrote an article for Liberty magazine predicting that by the year 2100, eugenics would be all the rage. He wrote, "In past ages, the law governing the survival of the fittest roughly weeded out the less desirable strains. Then man's new sense of pity began to interfere with the ruthless workings of nature. As a result, we continue to keep alive and to breed the unfit. The only method compatible with our notions of civilization and the race is to prevent the breeding of the unfit by sterilization and the deliberate guidance of the mating instinct." Tesla went on to applaud the sterilization of criminals and people with mental health disorders, but wanted governments to make marriage more difficult to ensure only people viewed as desirable parents would be allowed to breed. Yikes. Steve Jobs was a tyrant. Apple visionary Steve Jobs was reportedly a jerk to nearly everyone he came in contact with. The list of offenses is nearly endless, from firing people with no warning and no severance, to cursing out his employees, to asking people during job interviews if they were virgins. In one famous incident from the birth of the company, Jobs was offered a large bonus to do a job for Atari. Instead, he got his friend Steve Wozniak to do it, and lied to him about how much they were being paid, only giving him a small percent of the fee. But he was perhaps worse to his daughter Lisa, whom he denied was his daughter even after a DNA test proved it. She ended up on welfare while he enjoyed his millions. But hey, at least we all have cool phones now, right? Albert Einstein was a terrible husband. Einstein is pretty much required to be on any list of geniuses. But one person who probably didn't think Einstein was all that was his long-suffering first wife, Mileva Maric. In 1912, Einstein began a relationship with his cousin Elsa. Needless to say, Mileva wasn't pleased. In 1914, Einstein delivered a letter to his wife detailing a list of demands she had to meet if she wanted to stay married to him. She was required to make his meals and clean his house, but wasn't allowed to talk to him unless given permission, and was prohibited from requesting any kind of affection or intimacy. What a great deal! Instead, the couple separated later that year, and once the divorce was finalized, Einstein just went ahead and married his cousin. Oh, and some people think he took credit for her work too, so that pretty much stinks all around. Elia Kazan's Witch Hunt. The brilliant director behind classics like On the Waterfront, East of Eden, and A Streetcar Named Desire, Elia Kazan also helped found the prestigious Actors Studio, so you'd expect him to be beloved in Hollywood. In reality, though, he ended his life an outcast. Why? Well, at the height of the Red Scare in 1952, he was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee and asked to give up the names of suspected communists in Hollywood. He happily complied, and even took out an ad in the New York Times urging other people to participate in the witch hunt. The 8 people he named were blacklisted from Hollywood, their careers destroyed. Kazan, on the other hand, won the Oscar for Best Director 3 years later for On the Waterfront, a movie about how being a snitch is totally cool.
You're a cheap, lousy, dirty, stinking mug! And I'm glad what I've done to you. You hear that? I'm glad what I've done.
Times changed, though, and in 1999, Kazan was given the Oscar for Lifetime Achievement. Actors including Sean Penn took out an ad decrying the decision. On the night, hundreds of protesters were outside the broadcast. When he received the award, actors like Ed Harris and Nick Nolte refused to stand up for him or even clap.
In the last circle of hell are all the traitors, right? And there's one down there for Elie Kazan.
For his part, though, Kazan never regretted his actions, writing in his 1988 autobiography that it was an example of his, quote, true self.
Do you regret the decision now that you did that?
No, I don't. I'm the opposite.
Thanks for watching. Click the grunge icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.